Hello, my name is Zach Gittleman, and for the third consecutive year, this is What's Cooking at Riverview.
My name is Jimmy Kashivas, and I'm very proud and honored to be here at the Cape Cod Media Center for the second consecutive year for What is Cooking at Riverview.
And I'm Will Moorhan from Riverview School at the Cape Cod Media Center.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Kashivas, and I'm here interviewing Mr. Antonioli at What's Cooking at Riverview. And we would all love to welcome you guys for an awesome introduction with an awesome Riverview teacher, Mr. Antonioli, here with some questions that we've got. Mr. Antonioli, what was your favorite place to travel and why?
Well, Jimmy, I really didn't have a favorite place. I found that all of the countries that I visited in over 20 years of traveling overseas and working overseas, every country had its unique aspects of it that I really enjoyed, whether it be the architecture or the culture or the people that I met or the vistas that I enjoyed. So there was no real favorite place. There was always something in every country that was uniquely wonderful about that place.
If you were to go back to any of those places, where would you go back to and why?
In thinking about that, Jim, it probably would be Turkey. And the reason why I would want to go back to Turkey was because of its historical significance. The amphitheaters, the aqueducts, all of the roads and all of the structures that the Romans and Byzantines built in those ages a couple of thousand years ago, more than a couple of thousand years ago, was truly interesting to me. And some of the buildings, the Hagia Sophia, the Suleymaniye Mosque, some of the amphitheaters at Aspendos, they were just absolutely incredible, just incredible.
What was your most you've learned about these countries out of your time of travel?
Well, the most I learned from these countries, I think, Jim, was that people are basically the same in every country. They might look differently. They might have different customs, different ways of dressing in different countries. But basically, when you meet someone with a smile, a nice gesture, a handshake, even though you don't know their language and they didn't know your language, people were generally really, really friendly, enjoyable to be with, and I found that to be uniquely similar in all the countries. Kind of how you met them and how they greeted you.
What was your dream job in your time of traveling growing up?
For some reason, and I'm not sure I know that reason, Jimmy, but I guess because I experienced such wonderful teachers in my formative years, I guess I wanted to be a teacher. And so when I graduated from college and went to teacher's college and became a teacher, that was my dream job. But my real dream job there was teaching overseas and meeting so many different, being introduced to so many different cultures, so many different students, parents, relatives, and living in those countries for prolonged periods of time. It was really interesting. So yeah, that was really quite the dream job, teaching overseas.
How did you find out about Riverview, and what made you want to work at Riverview?
I had a student in Saudi Arabia, in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, who transferred to Riverview, the Riverview School, which I had never heard of. And I have relatives here on Cape Cod, and when I would visit them on vacation, they would tell me about the Riverview School, where the student was and the students that go to the school. So over the years, I learned a little bit about Riverview. And then when I came home in 2002, I applied and started working. 17 years later, I'm still there.
Still here with us.
Yeah, still with you.
What made you love to travel so much in your time with traveling?
When I was young, Jimmy, very young, my mom and dad, my mom's from Nova Scotia, Canada, and we used to travel up there in the summertime and to visit relatives. My mom is one of 7 girls, so I had a lot of relatives up in Nova Scotia, up and around the Sydney, Nova Scotia area. And I really enjoyed that, seeing the far reaches of Maine and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. And I loved doing that. And so when the opportunity came to teach overseas, particularly in Pakistan to begin with, we moved there to Islamabad, and that's where it all started.
What was your job? What was your job in these countries?
Well, in traveling with the Navy, when I flew for them, we did intelligence work, which I really can't go into in great detail. And then, of course, when I was teaching, I was a teacher in different countries. And then I became a headmaster of a middle school in Pakistan, in Islamabad. And then I had the opportunity when I was in Saudi Arabia to teach with the royal family. I taught 2 of the young princes English and writing and reading skills.
And what were the businesses like in these countries? Were they different or the same as the U.S.?
No, they were very, very similar to the United States. These countries had fast food stores like we do. Many American stores were in these countries, had outlets in these countries. The United States, I found, exported a lot of the food that you and I buy in the grocery store to grocery stores in these different countries. So it's really quite similar. The architecture might be different, walking into a grocery store in Islamabad, Pakistan, or in Singapore, but it was really quite similar, actually.
What was the technology like in these countries?
Well, in the early 80s, computers were just coming into use in schools, and we had Apple computers that we used to introduce our students to computers. It was fairly limited at that time, but as time went on, we got into the 1990s and the late 90s when we ultimately found ourselves in Saudi Arabia. I had a classroom that had 19 computers in it, 19 workstations with 3 printers and a very large screen TV.
So it was similar to the U.S.?
Well, I think because of the amount of money that Aramco had and put out for its schools, we had an awful lot of great support as far as computers and technology goes. My classroom was more of a writing laboratory than anything else. Yeah, so, technology like today, it improved and it became much more of an integral part of everyday life like it is now. I mean, our cell phones, and back at Riverview, we all have computers. You folks have writing labs, and we have several laboratories back at Riverview. So, it's all part of our lives now, Jim.
Were the businesses in technology that much different than in today's day?
Well, as I mentioned, it was more of a progressive thing over time. The more advanced computers became, the more important they became, and then the internet came along. And once that got trusted and built out with emails, and now we have, texting and all that, over time, it just became more of a part of our lives, as I mentioned.
Were the businesses different?
No, businesses used as they do now, computers. A lot of sales take part, online. Like Amazon and Wayfair and all of the retail outlets, eBay and and all of them. We didn't have those apps or those programs and things back in the 80s. Again, the internet really hadn't come into its own at all. And even in the 90s, the 1990s, it wasn't really much of a part of our lives. But, as the new century began and technology got better and security got better, computers became more important. And I would imagine, it's been 17 years since I've been back to all these different countries. I would imagine that they're quite sophisticated as we are. Okay.
Was it when you were growing up?
Mm-hmm.
What was your favorite sport to watch? Baseball, American pastime?
Oh, yeah, I was one of those Red Sox fans who, as a kid, disappointed, because the Red Sox never got very far into the playoffs or World Series or anything. But I will say we were very fortunate to live near Boston, just out in Sherborne, and we would go to quite a few ball games. But now it's so expensive to go to them. I don't go to quite as many ball games as we used to when we were kids.
Did you like football or basketball or soccer growing up?
Not really. No, it's mostly baseball and stuff.
Baseball was the most popular.
Yeah,
Soccer.
I wasn't much, Jimmy. I wasn't much of an athlete growing up. I was kind of one of those spectator guys, who watched football and stuff when the NFL was just starting.
Oh, this is the 100th anniversary of the
yeah,
NFL.
yeah,
100th season.
yeah. It is.
And soccer didn't come into the country at all.
Not too much. No, soccer really has never caught on big. Women's soccer has, fortunately, become quite popular in the United States. Let's go back to these, Jim, huh?
And what about basketball?
Well, I've gone to a number of Celtics games and stuff. I remember Bob
Basketball
Cousy
was
and-
very old school with like Bill Russell and Larry
Bird.
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 It
Yeah.
was one of those old school things.
Now, don't go back too far, Jimmy, and call it too old school, because I remember them as a kid. So, Russell and Cousy and Havlicek and those guys, Tommy Heinsohn and stuff, yeah.
I think that we've got all the questions for the day.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jim.
It was very good to interview
thank
you.
And it was enjoyable. I appreciate that, Jim. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone, for watching, and have a great day, everyone who's watching this. Catch you next time.